America is celebrating 250 years. And if you joined me yesterday for the Facebook Live session, I told you to practice the word semi-quincentennial. That is one word. I didn't count how many letters, but semi-quincentennial is the 250th commemoration anniversary of whatever you associate it with. But in this context, we're talking about America. We are celebrating that this year, and beginning yesterday, we here at Ancestry kicked off our Stories of Us campaign, which is going to bring the stories of everyday Americans, some notable, some maybe not as notable, with their connections back to family history records on Ancestry. And so we have an incredible site that we just launched. One of the stories that we talked about to kick off the campaign was about a man named Wesley Williams, who was the first Black fire chief in New York. And we were able to discover more information about a fire that he was a part of, where he helped to save more than 20 people at a tenement building in New York. And we were able to track down descendants of one of the families that he rescued, and we brought those two families together. So you may see that story on your local news, or you may see it in People magazine, actually, that was released in the last 24 hours. So be sure to check that out. We're actually going to talk a little bit about Wesley Williams and some of his records today. Something else that I also want to point out, and it's also on my t-shirt. That's why I wore this t-shirt today. This year, we are celebrating the 100th anniversary of what began as Negro History Week. That was created by Dr. Carter G. Woodson, and Negro History Week eventually became Black History Month in 1976. So it's 100 years since Negro History Week was started, and it's been 50 years since the first federal commemoration of Black History Month as a result of the order by President Gerald Ford. And so we're having lots of commemorations, right? You're going to see a lot of stuff around celebrating Black History Month and this big anniversary for us in the United States. Remember, in the US, we celebrate Black History Month in February, but in the UK, it's celebrated in October. So we get kind of, if you're doing research internationally, you kind of get to celebrate both. So we have those commemorations. So first one I went over, America 250. We've got Negro History Week, Black History Month 100th and 50th anniversaries. Additionally, this year marks 120 years since the treaties of 1866. Those treaties were with the U.S. government, with the Seminole, Choctaw, Chickasaw, Cherokee, and Creek nations, and that essentially abolished enslavement in the Indian Territory. So where last year we were celebrating the 13th Amendment, right? And it being 120 years since it happened. This year is the equivalent of that for people who have connections as freedmen of the five tribes. So that's another commemoration that is happening this year. Also, it is the 50th anniversary since the release of the book Roots by Alex Haley. That is taking place this year. Can't you see why I needed a list to be able to cover all this stuff that's happening this year with regard to anniversaries? And I know many of us who have come to genealogy and family history, many of us were inspired by the book Roots and eventually the miniseries that came out on television. One of the things that's one of my family's lore stories is that we actually owned a VCR at that point, and my father recorded it. And those videotapes were like the holy grail in my family. Do not ever tape over Roots. So I grew up with having that, and it was almost an archival moment because it wasn't just the actual movie, it was all the commercials. My dad would extend the time so that he wouldn't miss anything. So it would run into the news reports that were after. So it was literally like this time capsule of what was happening in the world in 1977 when the series aired. Super, right, super crazy. And my dad's thing was, he was like, one day they're going to charge people all this money to watch Roots, and I'm going to already have it on VHS. And that's exactly what happened. Right. Great comments in the chat, like back where there were TV events, right, where everyone had to stop and you had to sit and watch because we didn't have DVRs, we didn't have streaming, we didn't have any of that. And these are great questions around is there a streaming service that's going to rerun Roots this year? I don't know. I would hope they do. Maybe that's something we maybe need to work on. Yeah. So lots of anniversaries. Okay. So whether you're connecting to this from the semi-quincentennial, Remember, that's our new word for the week. That's our vocabulary word. We have to practice saying that in sentences. I don't know how you're going to incorporate that in your dialogue, but I'm going to make it my business to try to do that because I still can't say it all together as one word. But if you're celebrating America 250, if you're celebrating Black History Month and the commemorations with the 50th or the 100th anniversary, if you're celebrating the treaties of 1866, which abolished slavery in the Indian Territory and granted citizenship rights to freedmen of the five tribes, Cherokee, Choctaw, Chickasaw, Muskogee, Creek, and Seminole nations, or if you are connecting to this through celebrating the 50th anniversary of the release of Roots, there are plenty of ways for you to get in where you fit in when it comes to genealogy and family history. And so today, again, what we're going to do is I'm going to ground what we learned about today and discuss today based on our Stories of Us website. And so the Stories of Us is a microsite that we just launched at Ancestry. It goes right along with that campaign around Fire Chief Wesley Williams. And we have micro stories around about people all across the country that are, again, notable, not notable, or lesser known, and their connections that we can show based on records on Ancestry. So we're going to take a little tour. It's going to be a Black History Month tour around these records. Some people are chiming in, they're like, you can get roots on this. Perfect, thank you. But I also think, again, we should make that a moment this year. The book's release was in August, so we still have time. We got like 6 months in order to figure this out. There's plenty of time, right? Okay. And so with that said, let's move into Stories of Us. I'm going to share my screen so I can qualify. And some of these people you all may know, some of them you may not know. All right. Oh, someone asked, I'm looking at Q&A. Someone asked for my t-shirt. I don't think you can get this t-shirt anymore. It was sold probably 5 or 6 years ago. I got it at Target. And it was in a whole capsule for Black History Month. And I love it because it has all the years. So like the ones you can't see, it's got, what is it? Juneteenth was 1865. Black History Week or Negro History Week is 1926. Civil Rights Act in 1964. And then at the bottom, is yeah, Black History Month and then MLK Day in 1983. So it's got all the years on the bottom of it. Another question, let's see, would like for Ancestry to provide more recorded connections between Black American freedmen, Indigenous genealogy. Yes, we did do a session. I did a session last year during Native American History Month where I detailed my family connection back to the Cherokee Nation. And I talked about researching tribal records when you're trying to find a connection to an Indigenous or First Nations group. So if you missed that session, definitely go back and watch the replay on YouTube. You can do that at your leisure. All right. Someone said, can I put all the anniversaries in the chat? Absolutely, I can. And if I was mindful of this, I probably could have done this before with my wonderful people who helped me with the chat room here, because there are so many of you who are here. So I will go ahead and copy that in so you all have that available to you. And those are my notes. All right, we've answered all the questions thus far. We are doing more. Right. Right. Okay. Now, question that just came up. Best resources for learning the basics around researching our history and linking trees. Okay, you are in the right place. Now, resources for learning the basics, I think coming to these sessions is definitely going to give you the foundational knowledge you need to know about researching anyone, regardless of if they're Black, if they're Latinx, if they're Asian American, if they're European. Okay. It's always start with yourself, start with what you know, document that, create a free account, start your tree on Ancestry so that you can be organized and understand who is at play when you're doing your research. You engage family members, people who knew your family, who can answer questions, who can fill in the gaps for the stuff that you may not know. Then you go through your home, gather your records and your documents, those funeral programs, those obituaries, those birth, marriage, and death certificates, anything that's related back to your family history. You use those things to also inform your search and to fill in the gaps. And then you go online and you start searching. And as you build your tree out on Ancestry, you're going to get hints. that are going to direct you towards suggestions of records that may be your family members, or maybe your relations. And everything is held in that tree. The connection part comes where if your tree has the permission set in a particular way, if it's public, right? Not where living people, if they're marked living, they're always private to anyone else. Okay, so we got to make sure that that's known. Unless a person is given permission to come into your tree and edit and do things like that. If I'm on the site and I come across your tree and it's public, I'm not going to see living people. So I want to put that out there. But if your tree is made public and people can search and it can surface itself within search results, that is one way that you can connect with people who are researching the same families, right? Hints to other trees will show up in your hints. You will see, this tree, that tree, several trees who are researching the same family. So that's one way to connect with folks. Also use the messaging on the site. If you are seeing someone who is saving a lot of records, or even if you're working with things like newspapers.com, which I always have to give my shout out to newspapers.com because that's one of my favorite sets of records to work with and as part of the Ancestry family. On sites like newspapers, you can follow certain newspapers. And if you clip certain articles, you can follow that clipping so that if someone else clips that article, you will find out, oh, someone else is researching this. You can reach out to those people so that you can form connections and you all can become research buddies or maybe even potentially discover that you all are related to each other. So there's several ways that you can make connections, whether it's through just the records and the research, or it's connecting with people who are also doing research on the same families. Now, want to also point out newspapers.com during the month of February 2026, the historical Black newspapers on newspapers.com are free. I'm going to pause for impact because I want to make sure you heard what I just said. Somebody said repeat it. During the month of February 2026, the Black historical newspapers on newspapers.com are free. What is Nicka talking about? If you have sat through any session I've had here in the virtual event space at Ancestry, I always bring it up. Always. I consistently stay talking about newspapers.com. Okay. I'm going to show you through some of these examples of stories that we put together on the microsite, the best of what you can get in terms of like newspaper coverage. Some of the records that I have are from Black newspapers. So you're going to see the beauty of what that is. Oh, yes, it's wonderful news. Right. It's through February. You better get in where you fit in. If you have significant others and family members and they do not quite understand why you will not get off the computer and you've been on a newspaper site for several days, you can blame me. I will take and shoulder all the responsibility. I promise these are very strong shoulders. And I give you permission to do it. Now, do you need to subscribe for the free trial? No, you just need to have an account. Okay. So, yeah. So wanted to put that out there. All right. We've been talking for 15 minutes. I'm sure you all want to probably get to the records. Don't you want to see the records? You probably want to see the records. You probably want to see what is some of the stuff that you can potentially find on Ancestry. So, gosh, lots of stuff in the chat. My folks are here to help me. Either way, I'll get to some of those. I'll make sure I'll leave some time at the end for me to get to that stuff. All right, let's go in our browser. Okay, we are here. If you are interested in the microsite, you can get to it through ancestry.com/stories of us. Okay, this is going to be our hub of storytelling for America 250. And there are all sorts of things on here. And during the month of February, during Black History Month, we have stories, Black History Month stories that are there. Okay, so we're going to touch on some of these people that we're going to be talking about today. And again, these are awesome records. This was a great project for us to work on. So let's get to the first one. Again, this is ancestry.com/stories of us. All right. First person we're going to talk about is My guy, kind of my grandpa now in some ways. I feel like very close to him. Wesley Williams, Wesley Augustus Williams, first black officer of the fire department of New York. Uh-oh, what happened? My sound. Hmm. Okay. There we go. Can you hear me now? Okay, perfect. All right. Thank you. I love that you all use the chat so I can validate whether or not somebody can hear me or not. Okay. So back to Wesley Augustus Williams, was born about 1897, died in 1984, first black officer of the fire department of New York. And the story that we told that was a part of the People magazine story, as well as you may see it on your local news, is in 1929, Wesley Williams and obviously several others from the fire department of New York responded to a fire at 91 Allen Street in New York. It was a tenement, and it was not too far actually from the Tenement Museum in New York. And Wesley actually ended up suffering from smoke inhalation, had to be revived on the scene. There was another officer who was working for the fire department of New York who was within months of retiring. And he too suffered smoke inhalation and actually died on the scene trying to rescue all of these people. It was more than 20 people. And one of the sets of those families that Wesley actually saved was the family of a woman named Rachel Coffino. And as a part of the segment that we put together, we reunited the descendants of Wesley, one of which was his grandson, Charles, along with the descendants of Rachel Coffino, three of her grandchildren. So the grandchildren of both of these folks, the lady who survived and was rescued and the man that rescued them, were brought together and connected through this story. And the way that I've talked about it is, a lot of times with genealogy, we focus on blood connections, right? Familial connections, aunts, uncles, cousins, things like that. But sometimes we forget that there's also a story about people who are related by experience. And Rachel Coffino's family could have been completely and utterly ended as a result of this fire. But that's not what happened. What happened is Wesley came, the fire department was there, and they were saved. So if you were here on the microsite page, you'll get to see a picture of Rachel and her descendants. One of the things we also did as a part of this story was we commissioned a mural that is not too far away from 91 Allen, where the fire happened, that tells the story of Wesley and tells the story of the Coffinos. And so there's a picture of Rachel with her three children, and then the account of the fire on the left hand side. Now, we could easily stop with just this part of the story because there are so many records on Ancestry that detail Wesley's life. Things from, again, you're looking at his birth year. He's born in 1897. That immediately signals he likely has a World War I draft card, right? So just based on his age. He lived beyond World War II, so that means that he likely has a World War II draft card. We have the U.S. Census. Because he's in New York and New York City, we have the state census for New York. We have the federal census for New York. You even have newspaper articles. You've got city directories. You've got all of that stuff available because of where he lived. And again, this is literally just based on facts. But one of the things that I want to call out is a story that was in the New York Age. The New York Age is a black newspaper that is available on newspapers.com in the historical black newspaper section. And if you note, again, if you were doing any research into African American and African American families, you always want to check the black press and you want to check the mainstream press because sometimes the stories cover different details. In this one, in the New York Age, it's September 24th of 1927. It notes when Wesley was promoted. First Negro officer in New York's fire department is promoted on his merit after 8 years of service. Lieutenant Wesley Williams shares command of company engine number 55 with captain and fights two fires on the first night of duty. This dude was cold, wasn't he? He was cold. How are you gonna get promoted and then you got to go out and save people the same night? Like, you don't even really get to celebrate your success. You got to go out and do your job, right? Just went out, yes, and got to work. Now, here's the thing that I also love about Wesley's story. Engine number 55, that engine was the second on the scene at 9/11. What? That's where he got promoted. Wow. Yes. So this is the power of why, again, yes, the census can give us great stuff. These draft cards can give us great stuff. The state federal census can do it, birth, marriage, and death certificates. But if you want the meaty, meaty, meaty stuff, if you want all of those things, you really got to dive into newspapers. You really do. And look, if you continue through the story, when Engine 55, located at 363 Broome Street, responded to two fire calls on Friday night, September 16th, it was commanded by a Negro officer. The first time in history of the New York Fire Department that such an event has occurred. I absolutely love it. So we salute Wesley Williams and his story. All right. Next on, Richard Wright, one of my absolutely favorite people. Okay. I love Richard Wright for a number of reasons. It's one of the ways that I was able to connect with Black history and literature being a middle school student. And I just, again, I just remember being native son. I think it's like most middle school, high school students have to read this even now in the United States. And so I just remember the book really connected to me in such a specific way. And as I was beginning my genealogy journey, um, I never did I realize that I would be connected to this man. Richard Wright was born in Natchez, Mississippi. He was born 1908. He died in 1960 in Paris. The record that we have for him connects him back to two of his ancestors who were Civil War veterans. Both of his grandfathers fought in the Civil War on the side of the Union. And this record that we have for him is his draft card. And if you know, again, it's noting that he lives in New York, but he's born in Natchez. Now, I want to point something out here. A lot of folks don't realize that if you're trying to figure out how your family got to a particular area as a result of the Great Migration, you may actually go into things like draft cards for World War I and World War II to see if you can notice patterns. What do I mean? You can go in and search for a birthplace of Natchez, Mississippi, and then put in a residence location of New York. Or a better example of this would be put in a birth location of just Mississippi and then a residence location of Chicago. And you will see the thousands of cards, draft cards, that have that story, that are literally displaying the Great Migration in its splendor. Right. Now, what is my connection to Richard Wright? Our ancestors were enslaved together. I did not know when I read Native Son in middle school or early high school that my ancestors were enslaved with Richard Wright. I had no idea, no clue. And I couldn't understand why I was so drawn to that book. That's probably why. Look at all the depth of information. We get his wife's name. Even though this is not her draft card, this is another way you can research women. Is because they may have been listed as the next of kin on a man's draft card. You can also get mothers of individuals. Let's say you're trying to find a mother of a male family member and you are striking out and you're not finding them. Are they listed as a next of kin on somebody's draft card? Right. Also, look, he's working for Harper and Brothers. It's a publisher. And we get his signature right here. All right. So we got Richard Wright here, as I call him, kinfolk cousin. Madame Sul-Te-Wan. So let's move to the arts, right? Madame Sul-Te-Wan was the first Black actress to sign a film contract. And she had a career in Hollywood for more than 50 years. And the article that we have for her is of her renewing her SAG card, her Screen Actors Guild card, when she was 86 years old. So here's from the Valley Times on July 12th of 1957, this newspaper article from Madame Sul-Te-Wan. And it says, oldest motion picture actress. Yesterday, Madame Sul-Te-Wan renewed her Screen Actors Guild card at age 86. Here she's shown in her latest role in Band of Angels with director Raoul Walsh. Incidentally, one of her early day pictures is showing at the Apollo Theater in Hollywood, the film's Birth of a Nation, a revival, which is packing them in because she was actually in that film. Right. So what does someone like this who's notable because that's not her maiden, that's not her given name. Her given name was not Madame Sul-Te-Wan, right? That was her performance name. Can you look for her in records under that or under her birth name? Actually, you can find her in both. She was born in 1863 or 73 rather, which is definitely during Reconstruction time period, and she died in 1959. So she died within what was that? A couple years of this newspaper article. But if you look for her on the 1930 census in Los Angeles, she's actually on the census as Madame Sul-Te-Wan. Now, someone just asked a question about the draft card. And I'm going to go back just a second because I actually pulled the record here on Ancestry. If you want to see the back of the draft card, just click the arrow. That's how you get to the back of the draft card. Now, for World War One and World War Two, it's two different things. World War One, the front of the draft card and the back of the draft card, the images are together on the same image. But for World War Two, you have to just literally click the arrow. Go to the right. Okay. Now, for Madame Sul-Te-Wan, she actually is on the census with that name. You see her here, and it says she's the head of household. Her house was worth $5,000. She had a radio, which is great because this is 1930. And it mentions she was age 14 at first marriage. She's able to read and write. She's born in Kentucky. And when you scroll all the way over to her occupation, it says actress moving pictures. Now, also note, yes, she owned her house as a lady. Yes, I like that you were pointing that out. These are things we need to pay attention to, right? Also note that her son, her 23-year-old son, Honest, he was an actor as well. It tells you that right here on the United States Census. All right, so we did with Madame Sul-Te-Wan. William DeHart Hubbard, this is one of my personal favorite stories. I love this story. He was the first Black American gold medalist in the Olympics. We just had the Olympics in 2024. Yes, I think. Yes, 2024. Because it's been 2 years now, which is crazy because I feel like that just happened. And William DeHart Hubbard, he set a record at the Paris Olympics. And remember, the last Olympics we had was in Paris. It was 100 years since he won that medal. So it was 100 years since we had the first Black gold medalist. He was from Ohio, but he was a student and a graduate of the University of Michigan. So his connection, that's how his connection goes to Michigan. The record that we feature for him is his passport. And we're going to go on and look at the passport. Now, when you're looking at passports, and some of you may be like, oh my gosh, Black folks had passports in the 1920s? Absolutely, we did. Because we were going places. So don't make the hasty generalization that just because people were formerly enslaved or maybe didn't necessarily have the same jobs as other folks that we didn't go anywhere or we didn't do anything. No, no, no. People were applying for passports. He had to apply for one in order for him to go to Paris. He needed one, just like how you would need one to go on an international vacation. He needed one to go to the Paris Olympics. So this is his passport, which is in a collection called U.S. Passport Applications from 1795 to 1925. And yes, we do. We have the Winter Olympics this weekend. And it notes that he was born in Cincinnati. Note, here's another thing. Here's a great way to get information on parents where you may not, maybe let's say you have a kid who's on the census living with grandparents or living with other family members or someone else, and you don't know the names of their parents. You can get the names of parents on passport applications because this one tells you his father's name and the fact that he was born in Ohio, and it would tell you if the father was dead. Because they're saying now residing at, they would put dead if he wasn't alive. And so they ask questions like whether he's lived abroad. He says no, his permanent residence in Cincinnati, that he's a student, that he's never had a passport. And you all use the chat. What does this say the object of his visit is? Let's see how good your reading your handwriting is. Olympic Games. Right. Attend Olympic Games in France. And then he says, you know what? I'm going to go to England afterwards. I didn't put a reason why. And that he planned to leave the U.S. on June 16th, 1924. Now, some of you, yeah, attend, right? He said attend. Now, participate, he could have said participate, but he said attend. Note he applies for this in Ann Arbor, Michigan, even though he's from Ohio. Now, passports, how do you get to them? You go to this collection, U.S. passports, 1795 to 1925. Do not miss the second page. Sometimes when we're doing genealogy, we're getting like, we get really excited and we're like, oh, look, there's a dad's name. I'm going to go and I'm going to search for the father now in records, which is perfectly fine. But sometimes yes, gives the ship name he traveled on. Correct. So I'm going to put a pin in that. I'm going to come back to it. Sometimes we're so hasty with records, we forget there's a second page. Just like there's a back part to the draft card, there's a second page, and sometimes potentially more with passport applications. We get his height, his approximate weight, forehead size, complexion, gold across two front upper teeth, who identified him, then a photo. This is one of my favorite parts of passport applications because sometimes you don't have a picture of the person. I've even seen where they have additional documentation of like substantiating their identity, where like their mother says, oh, I birthed this child. This is his birth date or her birth date, right? Do not miss those extra pages in the passports because they are giving. I'm trying to tell you all, don't miss it. So, Uncle DeHart, we love you. Thank you for all you did for us and for winning that medal. Um, yes, right. Some folks said this is their first time seeing a passport application. I told you we are going on a tour. Okay. Yes, passports can be crazy rich. All right. Next, Bessie Coleman. We're going to talk about Bessie Coleman. She is a African American woman. She's the first one to earn a pilot's license. She applied for a passport in the year 1920 so she could start aviation school in France. Notice this. Notice there's been three people we've been talking about today who are Black who have connections back to France. The first one was Richard Wright. Richard Wright actually died in Paris. Okay. Second one was William DeHart Hubbard. We just talked about first Black gold medalist. He traveled to France and competed in the games, Olympic Games in France. And now Bessie Coleman is applying for a passport so she can go to aviation school in France. You all probably thought we were talking about African Americans. We aren't even going to go international. Nope, not today. Now, we want to definitely talk about Bessie Coleman because this year marks 100 years since she passed away as a result of an aviation incident. This year marks 100 years since that happened. Okay? So one of the records that I want to pull for her is Black newspapers. No, all these people clipping this article about Bessie Coleman, right? Now, some of you are like, oh, wow, how do you get to that? If you click, I'll click off the X, but if you click on this page and you come up here to the top, you'll see how many clippings have been made of the page. It'll give you the number, okay? And then you can see how people save it, right? So for this one, Bessie Coleman to appear in movies. And this is an absolutely awesome photo of her. It says Bessie Coleman, famous aviatrix, will be seen in person and in movies in YMCA benefit. And it gives her address in Chicago. She lives at 48th in Indiana. Now convalescing at the home of Mrs. S.E. Jones, 129 Southwest Street, where she has been since her return from St. Catherine's Hospital, Santa Monica, where she was taken following her fall at the municipal field there on February 4th, 1923. Now, for passports in the United States, that collection starts in 1795. Yeah, 1795. All right, so Miss Bessie, we got our newspaper article. We have her passport application here. Ooh, great. Someone made a great comment in the chat that Bessie Coleman attended one semester at Langston University before going to France to attend flight school. Langston University, yes, is a HBCU, historically Black college and university. All right. So more people who we could talk about who have great stories. I'm always going to talk about freedom of the five tribes, the Indian Territory, cowboys, all that kind of stuff. One of the more notable Black Americans is Bass Reeves, who's one of the first Black U.S. Deputy Marshals. He actually was a co-worker of my ancestor, Ike Rogers, who was also a Black U.S. Deputy Marshal serving out of Fort Smith, Arkansas, with the hanging judge, Judge Parker. And this is an example of a criminal court case file in Fort Smith, Arkansas. And with this, you'll see an arrest warrant for John Schreiner, Wiley Bear, and Tom Musi in the Creek Nation, June 15th, 1889. That they feloniously, willfully, premeditatedly, I didn't even know that was a word. That's like, I keep saying that wrong. Semiquincentennial. I'm going to butcher that all week. You are supposed to hold me accountable. If I can't say it, you got someone send me a voice note because I cannot say that word. No matter how hard I try to break up the syllables, I can't do it. Okay, so they premeditatedly and of their malice, aforethought, kill and murder one body, a white man whose full name is to affiant unknown. And this is, it says, against the peace and the dignity of the United States, and I pray with, and it's signed by Bass Reeves. And then here go all the witnesses and whatnot. Right. So someone asked a great question, or at least made a comment. Most of these folks are pretty well known. Most African-American ancestors didn't achieve even close to the notoriety. What about us average folks? Much harder to find information. I don't agree. Because most of my family members were not notable. Not at all. No. The process is the same. It's exactly the same. The question is, again, where are you searching? What are you searching for? And how are you qualifying your search results? Now, one of the things we often talk about, especially in this space, is around spelling. The fact that in genealogy, spelling is important, but it's not everything. Okay. Realizing literacy in the country. And if someone did not have the ability to read and write, they were at the mercy of being documented by other people. And what they heard was communicated around what their name and their details were. Then there's also the fact that people were missed in the census. I talk about this often. Despite the fact that I knew my uncle for my entire life, my uncle was not on the 1940 census at all. Wasn't. Should have seen a 2-year-old child in that household. My aunt and her entire family, at that point, she had 5 children and a husband. They were not on the 1940 census. Right. So I don't have it all. I'll wrap it up in a bow. I don't have a bunch of notable people. I don't have it every single line going research back to Methuselah. I don't have that. I'm just like you. And I research in states that are extremely sometimes challenging to research. I have enslaved ancestors. I have free people of color connected to me. I have the same exact challenges as you. And yet I haven't given up, just like you haven't given up. Spelling is probably the number one thing. And I think secondarily, it's the where. Due to gerrymandering, changing boundary lines of counties and parishes, maybe not being clear about the geographical area where your family lived. You might be searching for them in one spot and they actually weren't there. They were somewhere else. I would say that's probably number 2. Number 3 is being really clear about what the landscape is in your location where you're researching, and understanding the differences between researching in that state versus the neighboring one or other ones. Right. So someone said, I noticed your name is Smith. Right. That's a married last name. But Sewell, again, think about Sewell and all the names the ways it could be butchered. Soe, Sowell, Suel, Suell. You got to factor in all of those things. Spelling, I would say that's probably number 1. Number 2 is, again, the location. Did it shift? Did it change? Even if your family did not leave that spot, but again, through gerrymandering, it's in one county for one census or one set of records and then another, or maybe they live in a township that no longer exists. So you have to learn how to creatively search for that instead of drilling down to the well in your grandmother's yard. Sometimes instead of saying, I want to look for why not Mississippi, you do the county that it's in instead of trying to do the town as a search. That may also be one of the challenges as well. All right. I have a couple more stories to tell. And I think this one that I'm going to share now, again, you all may think these people are notable because they're on this site. I'm telling you right now, so many of these folks don't even have Wikipedia pages that we feature. Some of them don't, which means that they're not necessarily notable. All right. Two, depending on who you ask. All right. So let's go earlier because some of you are talking about individuals, people who are loyalists, right? Folks who fled the U.S. or would stay loyal to Britain and went into Canada during the Revolutionary War, especially when we're talking about America 250. A lot of those people ended up in Nova Scotia. There are records such as the Book of Negroes that catalog, yes, and they did go to Mexico too. I'll also add there's a whole area of Trinidad that's named for the Americans. Those were folks who were still a part of the Continental Army who were resettled from the United States into Trinidad, and they literally the districts in that area are named after the regiments. So folks displaced quite a bit after the Revolutionary War. With that said, I'm going to talk about Henrietta Bowers Duterte. She is the first woman undertaker in the United States. The business was left to her by her husband, and she hid freedom seekers, individuals who were trying to escape enslavement through the Underground Railroad, in coffins to get them to safety. Now, one of the records we have for her is a part of a collection called Pennsylvania and New Jersey Church and Town Records. It ranges from 1669 to 2013. It's wide range. But this is literally a receipt of Henrietta billing the city of Philadelphia for burials that took place in Lebanon Cemetery. If you want to find out what she looks like on the census, she's listed as an undertaker. Right there. Widowed. This is in 1880 in Philly. Her sister is there. She's got a nephew and a couple boarders in the house with her. And she's born in Pennsylvania. Okay. Now, another favorite record collection of mine, voter registrations list. This is a new collection that we got more recently on Ancestry for Manhattan voters. I'm going to close with this one before I start getting the questions. This is the voter registration for Zora Neale Hurston. Yes. Oh, right. The uncle, let me go back before we go to Zora. Yes, the nephew was a clothier. Another way, again, you use family members. Her name was Henrietta Bowers Duterte. Let me go back to her slide so you can see her name. Henrietta Bowers Duterte. And another way, again, you can use other family members' records to flesh out family histories, especially for women, because we tended to be erased sometimes in records. Her brother had an account at the Freedmen's Bank, and his account with the Freedmen's Bank was in New York. His name was Jeremiah Wilson Bowers. It listed he was born in Philadelphia. It gives his address. It says he's a caterer. They list the parents' names. And then down here, you see sisters and brothers, John C., Thomas J., Hannah, widow of Henry Miller, and Henrietta, widow of Frank Duterte. All right, back to Zora Neale Hurston. And we'll get to questions, comments, queries, and conundrums, and me trying to say semi-quincentennial. So Zora Neale Hurston's living at 425 West 124th in New York. And if you go over, you look at her occupation, and it lists that she's a writer. And there's her signature. Right, I finally said it right. I'm so glad. It took me 17 times to try to say semi-quincentennial. All right. Questions and more. Let's see. What are people asking in our Q&A function? I know it took me the whole webinar. Didn't it take me the whole webinar? It took me the whole webinar to say it. I just have to keep saying it over and over again. Hoping to find information about slave households. My fifth grade grandmother was named Sylvie Finley. Her children all have name of Barnhill. And her owner lived between Delaware, Philadelphia, and Western PA. Reverend James Finley had several homes. I descend from her son, William Barnhill, who married a Quaker. Found this from other trees, but I do not know how to make sense of records about her. Okay, if we're talking about enslaved people, in order to find out more information about them, you have to research the slaveholder because the slaveholder is determining where they are, whether they're in their possession, what their life station is like. And so dig more into Reverend James Finley. And it makes me feel like, especially since she married a Quaker, that Finley was probably a Quaker. And at some point, the Quakers disavowed enslavement. And so you would likely are probably, I would imagine, going to find manumission for her, meaning that he set her free. And then also he's in Delaware was a slave state, but Pennsylvania is not. So I'm wondering if those manumission papers are actually in Delaware. They might be, but you have to research him in order to find information about her. Okay, let's keep going. Ooh, great question. Grandma didn't know her father, but know he died in prison. How do you access prison records? Depends on privacy laws, whether or not they're available for public use and searching. That is all dependent on the state. There are some states that we have on Ancestry, like Alabama prison records. We have those. Texas, we have records for those. But again, the dates that the recentness of those depends on privacy laws. Um, let's see. Can we find records from Jamaica or parts of Africa? Absolutely. You can find records from Jamaica or parts. Hey, Dr. Ship. Just realized who that was. Yes. So records in Jamaica, Jamaican records are held in what are called civil registrations. And so that's one cohesive collection of births, marriages, and deaths. We do have those indexes available on Ancestry. It makes for great research because you can search for one name and you can find all the births for a respective family based on that person being listed as a father or searching by the mother. Parts of Africa, again, a lot of this is based on records availability and what we've already acquired at Ancestry. So yeah, that all depends on where, because Africa is a continent. So it depends on the country, again, what's available and all of that. Okay, so someone's typing an answer about that. Talked about Black Native Americans a little bit earlier. Let's see. Hospital records. All right. So, first collection I'm thinking about with regard to hospital records is probably the Freedmen's Bureau. Freedmen's Bureau they operated hospitals. I've talked about this before. Howard University Hospital was a Freedmen's Bureau hospital. So you will find patient lists. You will find even things like admissions, when people died. All that stuff is available in the Freedmen's Bureau. Now, individual hospitals, remember, those are private entities owned and operated. And so, depending on where those records ended up, if they were at like a state archives, a historical society, sometimes that stuff ends up on Ancestry, but not always. But then again, I always tell people we have a lot of stuff on Ancestry. I can't tell you everything that we have because sometimes I come across collections and I'm like, we have that? So keep checking back and looking and make sure you use the card catalog. Please explain where all these databases are found on Ancestry. Um, I'm guessing not the free version unless we go to the library to use. It all depends. There are quite a few collections that are on Ancestry that are free, and all they require is that you have a register, just an account. Things like 1950 census, free. But then some of the collections, again, are where the subscription comes into play. If you ever want to know where to find or how to find collections on Ancestry, the easiest way to find them is to use a card catalog. And this is something this is like cousin Krista's, one of her jams. We always are taking people to the card catalog because people don't know that it's there. And you want to come up here to search, and you want to go to the card catalog. And you can search by the title of the collection and the keyword. The other thing you can do is like, let's say you're super interested in what is has been added to the site that's new. Instead of it's defaulted to date added, you can put this on date updated, or you can put it on the record count or the collection title. Anything that's updated has an updated blue button, and anything that is new has new. If you want to limit this to just the United States or a particular continent, you can click USA, and then that will remove all of the results that are not applicable to that respective category. So here's one I didn't even know we had: Nashville, Tennessee Database of Enslaved Persons. Did not know this was added. This is why you need to keep coming back to this page. Right? Some of the bigger updates, newspaper stories and events. This will give you a hint on a record that is on newspapers.com and send you over there. Lots of stories and events index updates are here. Again, looks like Texas birth index was updated. So those of you who are researchers in Texas, Texas death index was updated. Some of y'all might be missing this. So here's one area. The other thing you can do is come up to search and go to all collections. If you're defaulting to searching to the US quite a bit, it's going to come to this page. If you want to know what's available in a respective geo, come down here to the map, click on the state, and it'll tell you. Let's pick Alabama just because I want to be picking Alabama. And then you can narrow by the county. And then there's also these headings: census and voter lists, birth, marriage, and death, military, immigration, some of the newspapers or periodicals that are on Ancestry, not necessarily on newspapers.com, pictures, directories and members lists, courts, land, wills and financial, dictionaries, encyclopedias and reference maps, all of that stuff. And here's the thing, it's not just Alabama that has that page. You can come over here to the right and select another state. Now, this should not be news to some of you, but maybe it is, but that's okay. Right. I don't know why I went to Alabama, but I just, I feel like Alabama doesn't get a lot of love it needs to get. Don't also forget that this is defaulted to show a certain number of collections, but you can click the link and it'll show you the full list. Okay. More questions. We got a few more minutes left. I've been researching for 15 years and noticed the removal and declined slave schedules or any slaveholder records. What is Ancestry doing to help with retrieving them? I'm not quite exactly sure. I don't know what you mean by removal or declined of slave schedules. The slave schedules are there and they're staying there. In terms of records regarding enslavers, the biggest thing I can tell you about in the last 2 years that has happened is a collection that we have called Articles of Enslavement. We did a whole session on that here. I've talked about that quite a bit. So if you want to do a super deep dive on that, I would definitely go back to the recording of that on the education page or on YouTube. But that features, my gosh, more than 250,000 names in that collection. It directly relates to enslavement with auctions and runaway slave ads that are mentioned in newspapers. That collection is free. You can search it on newspapers.com and you can search it on Ancestry. And what I mean by free is the index is searching is free, as well as access to the articles that connect back to those stories. All right. Oh, great question. What is the best way to trace names that have changed several times, as my husband, whose name is now Navy, but several family members are Naveau, moved from Nova Scotia to Louisiana and Texas? Okay. I almost feel like it's reverse. Like they went from Louisiana to Nova Scotia, or they might be Acadians that did the opposite. As someone who researches French last names in Louisiana, I am praying your patience. I wish I had a catch-all for name misspellings. If I had a wand, I would wave it. You need to get familiar with using your asterisk and your question marks. We talk about this a lot, right? When you have a last name that's complicated. So you said Navy, right? Or they would say Navy in Louisiana. If it's Naveau on certain records, that's kind of like, I think Navy is a nickname for Nouveau. So maybe you could be NAV or N question mark V. A question mark replaces one character and asterisk replaces multiple. You got to know, you got to have your short list of all of those variations. The other thing you also have to think about is using sound X searches or sounds like searches on Ancestry. Okay, what does that look like? I'll give you an example quickly because we only have a few minutes left. Okay, so you said Navy, and I'm gonna keep saying it like that because I'm gonna be extra. You can put in that because it could be Navie, Navy, right? And asterisk is going to do more, one or more characters. You also put in Nouveau. So what if Navy is NE on a record? You can do NE or N question mark, which can capture NA, NE, NIV, whatever that is. Get familiar with all the name variations. You're going to have to search through all of those. I wish I had a better answer for you, but baby French and Louisiana. I wish. I wish. Um, let's see. Link for Civil War pension records does not take ones to those records. Okay. So you need, and here's the thing, that's to the cards, not the records. The actual files are at the National Archives. There are a selected set of those that are on fold 3. So we do need to get the link corrected. We can probably post that in the chat. I think somebody has access to that because I can't get to it quickly. Um, Oh, okay. Great question. Grandfather died in Murfreesboro. All right, Middle Tennessee. Found a newspaper article on his death, but no history. Okay, well, here's the thing. His death was covered in the paper. That's history. The question is, did you search for him in other articles in that same newspaper or in Middle Tennessee? Have you contextualized his life through the census, through marriage records, death certificates? Because, see, the state of Tennessee has deaths and it has marriages on the site, and those include the images of the actual certificates. Got to use other stuff. Um, this is a great question. Okay, I think I'll do maybe one more. Um, let's see. Oh, maybe we need to talk about this. Suggestion around doing sessions or resources that can aid in writing the stories of your ancestors. Hmm, it's a great suggestion. We'll throw that in the kitty for later. Um, are there ways to find research people who were enslaved and then were on the next census after slavery ended? Yes. This is a great question to close out. I think number one, when you're trying to find out who enslaved your ancestors, number one, like who the last person was, like the last person when the Civil War happened, the clues are generally with who they were interacting with right after the war. So between 1865 and 1870, who are they transacting business with? Who are they working for? Who are they in community with? And it may not necessarily be the person with the same exact last name. Do not make that hasty assumption because here's the thing, the connection back to a slaveholding family with the same last name, it may have been several generations back, not the last slaveholder. And if you get lost in the sauce on it's got to be that family because that's the one with that name. But again, it could have come from several generations back. You're not going to find who the last person is. So be focused more on who they were dealing with. Were they buying and selling things with a particular set of people? There's all kinds of clues like that. There is no one size fits all for it, but really pay attention to who they were dealing with and follow those leads. Look to see and validate if those families were in fact enslavers or if they weren't. The thing about researching enslavers is you have to research the enslavers' family history. You have to. You cannot decide to skip that step to try to find your ancestors as enslaved people. That is not how this research works. You have to research the slaveholding family in order for you to contextualize and find your family while they were enslaved. All right. We are at time, people. We survived. I said the word about 5 times. It is your job to use it in a sentence this week. It is also your job to continue your learning. Please be sure to make sure you fill out your surveys and give your feedback on what you feel we should talk about. I definitely saw some of you all giving feedback in the chat around like topics you want us to talk about maybe later this month or later this year. We love to hear all of that information. Make sure you watch the recording. So if there's something you missed or you weren't exactly sure exactly what I was talking about, you can go back and rewind it and do all those things. And definitely don't give up. If you need permission to keep this journey going, if you need the inspiration, I hope this session served as that. And I hope you continue finding exactly what you're looking for in your research. All right, y'all, thanks for joining me on this incredible day, and I will see you soon. Bye bye.